So this video is going to show you an important leash skill that will be hopefully very helpful to you when it comes to dogs who pull. So a few things right off the bat. I always expect dogs to pull the first 60, 90 seconds that they come out of the kennel. They've been anticipating a walk, maybe they're house trained and they really have to go. So to me, it's expected that everyone is gonna pull for that first 60 to 90 seconds. Now, if they continue to pull hard after that, most of these dogs are pulling against the pressure they feel on their neck caused by the leash or by the martingale kind of technique. And so these are gonna be two different leash harness techniques that will be super helpful for you going forward to relieve that pressure on the neck and then have a nice pleasant walk. So most important tools for this routine, one, treats. Lots of treats. Make sure you have extras, especially if you have treats that you can crumble into smaller bits. We're using those as distractions to give this a little leeway with time to maneuver the leash and make the whole thing a positive experience. This works with a clip leash attached to the martingale. However, I don't love it because you have less leeway with the martingale than you do with the opening on the slip leash that goes around their neck. And the point is to relieve the pressure on their neck. So using it with a clip leash on a martingale, it redistributes the pressure and it can relieve a little bit, but I do often still find that dogs pull quite a bit. So I really suggest using a slip leash for this. The longer leash, the better, because once you've used the leash to wrap around the dog, depending on the size of dog, you may be left with like a shorter handle. For me, usually the benefit of having the dog not pull far outweighs the downside of having a shorter leash to literally handle them on. But I usually recommend people, when you're first practicing this skill, do it on every dog. Get those reps in, so when you really need to do it, it's smooth, it's easy for you, and you'll find what you prefer. So there's two different styles. The first one we're gonna show with the help of Caribou is the least invasive style. It's the style that I use on dogs that I don't know super well or who seems really sensitive or kind of nervous to a lot of touch. It is really hands off, it's really fast, so I don't have to do a lot of hovering, a lot of touching, and I still get that benefit. Come here. So the leash is just around his neck like normal, like we would walk a dog. You're gonna wanna make sure that your leather piece is pulled all the way up so it doesn't interfere with anything. I recommend small treats, again, that you can crumble into many little treats to keep him distracted. Can you sit? There. It's best if the dog is standing, and it can complicate things if the dog is really good at down. Because you're gonna need to reach under their belly, and that's hard to do when they're laying down. It also compromises you a lot to have to lean over deeper to get to them when they're laying down. So if they're standing, it is ideal. Sit is usually fine too. And so you're gonna crumble up your treats. Now, posture-wise, it's super important that you aren't leaning directly over the head of your dog to do this. One, that's uncomfortable for them. It can be scary, it's a little intimidating. Two, if they jump up, if you kind of have an aroused dog who jumps up, who doesn't have a lot of impulse control, you're at significant risk of getting muzzle punched in the face, which if it's happened to you, not fun. So I highly suggest when you're doing this technique to have your body mostly parallel to the dog. This gives you the option, if they get aroused, if you're slow, if whatever happens, you can turn away instead of only being able to go back, and you'll be a lot more successful. So crumble up some treats. These soft ones are great. We're gonna sprinkle them on the ground to the right of the dog, and I'm going to hand the handle of the leash under the dog to my other hand. Come here. Come here. Okay, treats down. Handle, hand it to yourself. See how I can keep my arms nice and big? If I get, you can still hand it to yourself, but sometimes people will feel panic, the dog will start to move, and they get really huggy on the dog. If you feel like you need to have that, if your dog doesn't stay focused on the treats, stop, take a breather, start again. Sometimes it can take 4 or 5 times to do it, but the patience will ensure that the interaction is positive for the dog and for you. they'll get used to the routine, it'll be less of a struggle, and we don't have anyone getting uncomfortable and feeling like they can't move away in the situation and being forced to growl, snap, whatever. So don't be afraid to start over, and don't be afraid to have to do it a bunch of times. So just to show you again, treats on the ground next to him. While he's distracted, I'm handing the leash to myself. So that's step one. It's on his neck normal, it's around his belly, and then all you have to do is take this handle and slide it through the neck hole. Now, I like to slide it through the collar too because it gives me a little bit extra insurance that the loops aren't going to get big enough that the dog can walk out of it. Once you've pulled that through, I just redistribute the pressure a little bit, and you can see what we have. Sit. Now it is still around his neck, but you can see it's also around his belly. Can you sit? Oh my God, you're a star. And come on, let's walk. Now Caribou isn't a terrible puller, but this gives you great control. You can now, if you need to change directions, if you have a dog who's super reactive, I can control his whole body instead of just his neck, which is extremely helpful. So to reverse the leash harness this style, you're just gonna reverse the process. So to undo it, take your crumbly treats, set them next to the dog while he's distracted. Sometimes you're not ready, that's fine. Make sure you're loose. While he's distracted, all you're gonna do is just pull that leash from underneath his collar and you're reset. Now, the most important thing with this or any leash harness or any adjustments that you're making to the dog's leash in general is to one, not ask them to do this and behave for this and learn this while they're in their kennel, anticipating going out for a walk. And you're not doing it immediately when you get in the hallway when the dog gets out. It's not that serious. You can let them pull you to the door and then take a breather. Use something like a vestibule, like the front doors here. Not sure. Or at Pylog, the vestibule coming in the back door to set and reset your leash harness. If it's super busy, hectic, you can use an interaction room, but don't expect them when they've been anticipating their midday walk or the evening walk this whole time to be compliant with you when they first come out, especially with all the variables of the other dogs being distracting. If they're reactive, you're setting them up for failure, you're setting yourself up for failure. So walk them to your place that you've decided is where you're going to adjust the leash. Take a deep breath and use that moment to make the adjustments you need. Go for your walk. When you come back, use that vestibule, use that breathing spot before you get back to their kennels to reset it. That way when you get to the kennel, all you have to do, have them go in, sit, treat, take it off, done. Okay, so this next version of the leash harness is really helpful if you have a dog generally that you're familiar with, that you spent time with, that you've handled a lot, you know what their reaction is to lots of touch, and you also have a leash that's relatively short that you're gonna end up, once you do the standard leash harness, you're gonna end up with basically just the handle. This one allows you to have a longer length of the leash because there's less wrapping around the body, but it does require more touching, more intimacy, more trust with the dog. And so I like to defer to the first one. Again, if you've handled the dog tons and you find out like, oh crap, I have a short leash, feel free to try this one. The most important part of this one is getting a consent test and assessment of the dog's comfortability with being handled. And so to do that, again, come out of the animal living spaces to kind of a neutral space, whether that's an interaction room, whether that's a vestibule, whether it's you get outside and they're continuing to pull and you can redirect them with a treat. Caribou, come here. Can you get that, please? Come here. Thank you. Okay, so consent test is important. First thing that you're gonna do, again, keeping your body parallel to the dog, is a full body pet. Head to tail, full body pet. Now what I'm looking for is, does the dog become extremely stiff? Do they pull away? Do they, when I'm touching down, do they whip their head around to see what I'm doing? If I see any of those indications, I know that I don't have a lot of trust with the dog yet, that they might be really sensitive, and I'm not gonna push it. So either I'm gonna try the other leash harness. If they still seem too scared for that, we're gonna go on a short walk, make sure we potty, and we're gonna come inside and spend a nice time together off leash or in the yard, where they're not pulling me, I'm not being dragged around, they're not being choked. So this is really about listening to the dog and paying attention to those physical cues. Now, if they respond fine, like Caribou did, totally stayed soft. The second thing I do, because you are gonna be touching a paw, he said, he wants to resist. Oh my goodness. The next thing I do, and you're gonna notice again, my body being parallel to the dog, on the side, not on the front. Crumble your treats, put them on the ground. I prefer if they're in a sit. Can you get up? I do full touch down the front. Again, what I'm looking for are a sharp pull away, a head flick, a growl, a snap, general discomfort. If what I'm finding is totally same body posture, totally fine, I'm gonna feel comfortable going to the next step. So reset with your dog, stand up, get your position parallel to them, put your treats down, and then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna pull one paw through the neck hole so it looks like a sash. So we're gonna open up that neck hole. I'm gonna lift up his paw, pull it through. So you can see here, parts around the neck, it goes under this arm, under here. Now, very important, this piece, you can simply push down your leather piece if it is a tight, secure one. And you're really gonna monitor while you're out with the dog that the tension is staying strong enough, that this loop isn't loose enough that you're gonna lose the dog. If you're really worried about it, you can copy the other technique and just slide your handle through their collar for a little extra insurance. Okay. The luxury of this is that I still have most of the size of my leash. So if you have kind of a fatso or anybody who's thick-bodied or you have a short leash, this can be a great alternative. You're getting the same controllability, their whole physical body instead of just their head. But it is more intimate. So again, pay attention to the cues of the dog, pay attention to your relationship with the dog. And for reset, exact same thing. We're going to use treats on the side while he's distracted. I only have to pull this leash handle back through the collar. I'm gonna have to loosen it, pull his leg back through so it's just around his neck and start over. Hi, you're just like the best boy ever. Pull this up. Now, maybe you get through one half. Maybe you pull the leash out of the collar, then he's hyper-focused on you, he's excited again. Take a breather. Use treats again. If you have to do it in 6 steps, you have to do it in 6 steps. Be patient with yourself, with him, and we'll create good habits. Put those down. Pull paw through, perfect. Reset. Final thoughts. Obviously, not all the dogs you're handling, working with, will be as well behaved and maneuverable and manageable as Caribou. So, that being said, practice these techniques on dogs that are known to you, that you've found to be easy to handle. Get those repetitions in. Then when you get to someone who is harder to manage, who has a shorter attention span or lower impulse control, you will at least have the basics and know your steps enough that it will be simpler. And of course, most important thing, don't get frustrated. And not just with them, just with the process. So if you need to stop, you need to take a break, you need to pivot. Even teaching a half of the leash harness routine to the dog, but keeping it positive, is gonna be helpful in getting them to understand it later on. Understand it later on.